Picture the busiest gym in town. The moment you step inside, the thumping bass of workout music and the hum of treadmills spinning at full tilt. People of every shape, size, and ability level fill the room. Now, among the sea of bright workout shirts and flashy sneakers, you spot someone you almost don't notice at first, John Wick. He's got on a plain, slightly faded hoodie and scuffed up shoes that look like they've seen better days. He doesn't strut in or announce himself. He just quietly finds a spot near the free weights, keeping to himself. At a glance, you might assume he's a shy newcomer or someone just here to kill time. But there's something about the way he carries himself, a sense of calm that cuts right through the noise. And as you'll soon find out, there's far more to him than meets the eye. In just a moment, he'll do something no one expects. And trust me, once you witness what John Wick is about to unleash on these gym bullies, you'll never look at a humble face the same way again. Before we jump in, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support keeps us motivated to create more breathtaking content. Now let's begin. In the bustling heart of the city, nestled among towering skyscrapers and neon-lit streets, a sprawling fitness center called Titan's Edge served as a second home for countless gym-goers seeking to push their limits, perfect their form, and carve out their own personal victories. Among the treadmills humming in steady unison and the rhythmic clang of barbells slamming onto rubber mats, a discreet figure known simply as John Wick quietly made his way across the gym floor, dressed in plain, dark athletic wear that helped him blend into the background, despite possessing a reputation that could shake even the most seasoned lifters. John had come here tonight for one reason only: to train in peace, sharpening both body and mind. Never one to broadcast his presence or flaunt his impressive skills in front of an audience. The warm, fluorescent lights illuminated racks of gleaming weights arranged in perfect order, and mirrors lined each wall, reflecting the determined faces of people chasing their goals with unyielding focus, while John, in contrast, sought only stillness amidst the chaos. With measured steps, he approached a free bench in the quieter corner of Titan's Edge, setting down his worn gym bag and rolling his shoulders in a ritualistic warm-up that spoke of years, if not decades, of disciplined repetition. His stoic posture and calm demeanor kept prying eyes at bay. To the casual observer, he might appear just another dedicated fitness enthusiast, minding his own business and politely acknowledging the regulars with a nod if they happened to glance his way. Yet beneath the surface, John's every movement radiated a lethal grace, the sort that came from specialized training most people only witnessed in high-octane action films or read about in hushed internet forums devoted to martial arts legends. He loaded a moderate weight onto the barbell and began a series of steady bench presses, each rep completed with immaculate form and synchronized breathing, the faintest hint of a challenge flickering across his calm features but never blossoming into arrogance. A few curious gym members who recognized the hallmark tightness in his technique paused mid-set, momentarily wondering if he resembled a certain elusive action star rumored to frequent unassuming gyms under the radar, but none felt certain enough to ask. Meanwhile, in the far side of the room, the thunderous laughter and boastful chatter of two infamous gym bullies, Damien and Rico, echoed off the mirrored walls, signaling trouble to those who had endured their antics before. Damien was tall and lean, sporting a perpetual smirk that hinted at his flair for humiliation, while Rico, shorter but powerfully built, exuded raw aggression with every step. Both men hungry for attention and respect they often demanded rather than earned. Known for cornering newcomers, mocking anyone they perceived as weaker, and hijacking equipment in the name of alpha dominance, these two had driven away more than a few potential members with their toxic bravado. Tonight, however, they were on the prowl for fresh prey, scanning the floor for anyone timid enough to taunt or new enough to manipulate into a public display of inferiority, fueling the sadistic pleasure they found in others' discomfort. Their voices carried over the steady hum of workout playlists, praising each other's questionable form and laughing uproariously at inside jokes meant to belittle anyone who didn't align with their brand of gym culture. John, intent on maintaining his concentration, continued his set without giving Damien or Rico a second glance, his mind locked on proper alignment, precise muscle activation, and the rhythmic cadence of each breath. He racked the bar after a slow, controlled final rep, exhaling softly as he rose from the bench, rotating his shoulders to keep the muscles warm, all the while sensing a shift in the ambient tension that suggested unwelcome eyes lingering on his back. Sure enough, Damien spotted John's calm demeanor and quietly assessed him as a potential target, nudging Rico and muttering something under his breath about the new guy who thinks he's too good to greet us. Little did they know, John had observed them too, registering every detail of their posture, their volume, their interactions with others, and the aura of intimidation they radiated like a foul perfume that clung to them in every corner of the gym. Determined not to let negativity disrupt his carefully cultivated inner stillness, John wiped down the bench, then moved toward the squat rack, ignoring the mocking whistles that Damien threw his way like fishing lines, hoping to hook a reaction. He aligned his feet, positioned the bar across his shoulders, and began a low-intensity warm-up set of squats, the mechanical precision of his movements hinting at reserves of strength well beyond what a casual observer might guess from his understated presence. Rico, already bored with harassing a timid teenager on the leg extension machine, locked onto John's unresponsive figure, deciding that nothing irked a bully more than someone who refused to cower or concede attention. Together, Damien and Rico advanced in John's direction, exchanging conspiratorial grins as though they were about to stage some twisted show, with John as their unsuspecting star. Oblivious, or perhaps unconcerned, John completed his squat set with impeccable form, then paused to re-rack the bar carefully, not a single wasted movement betraying any of the typical jitters that came from confrontation. Damien cleared his throat in an exaggerated manner, stepping just close enough to encroach on John's personal space, while Rico flanked the opposite side, arms crossed, radiating hostility. A hush fell over the nearby onlookers. Those who knew the bully's methods either tensed up or discreetly gathered to see how the newcomer would handle this unwanted attention. John turned, meeting Damien's gaze with an expression so neutral it bordered on serene, as though silently asking if they needed the rack before he continued. "Hey, tough guy," Damien sneered, loud enough for anyone in earshot to pause their workout and cast a wary glance. "You hogging all the equipment for yourself, or can we normal folks get a turn?" Rico let out a rude snicker, adding something about hotshots who act like they own the place, clearly baiting John, expecting him to snap back. Instead, John merely offered a courteous nod, calmly replying that he'd be finished soon and they were welcome to share if they needed the station, a simple invitation delivered without an ounce of aggression. Confused by the lack of fear or irritation in John's voice, Damien shuffled his feet, then tried a more direct approach, smirking as he commented on John's basic squat weight, implying it was nothing special. John, unruffled, incrementally added more plates and quietly replied that everyone has their own pace, emphasizing the importance of technique and safety over ego lifting. The crowd, growing more intrigued, caught the subtle shift in Damien's posture, that slight recoil bullies exhibit when their intimidation fails to land, though Rico stepped forward to salvage the situation by delivering a half-challenge, half-insult. "Bet that fancy technique won't help you when you throw your back out with real weight," Rico jeered, setting his stance and flexing his arms with an exaggerated show of bravado, glancing around to see if anyone was impressed. John exhaled, regarding Rico with a measured calm that radiated quiet power, the same hush that unsettles loud personalities accustomed to seeing knees buckle and eyes drop in submission. Without a word, John squared himself under the bar once more, now significantly heavier, and executed a set of smooth, flawless reps that had the watcher's jaws dropping in disbelief. Each squat was a testament to meticulous practice, controlled breathing, and a core strength that seemed to defy the size of the man performing it, leaving Damien and Rico momentarily stunned. As John racked the bar with gentle precision, a faint murmur of approval rippled through the onlookers, many of whom recognized that they were witnessing something extraordinary. Damien tried to mask his embarrassment with a forced laugh, claiming John was still warming up for an inevitable failure, while Rico fidgeted, clearly unsure how to proceed now that their usual routine of bullying wasn't yielding the desired outcome. Little did they know, they had barely scratched the surface of John's capabilities, for he was in fact the legendary action star known for performing his own stunts and orchestrating cinematic feats that few professional fighters dared to replicate. And as the tension thickened, the entire gym had no idea that this was only the beginning, that the confrontation sparked by Damien and Rico's arrogance would soon escalate into a spectacle none of them would forget, serving as a stark reminder that true power needs no audience to prove itself. As the onlookers at Titan's Edge recovered from the initial shock of witnessing John Week's flawless squats, Damien and Rico exchanged hard stares, each silently daring the other to force a confrontation that would restore their bruised pride. Tension radiated through the gym like a live wire, energizing the crowd with a mix of unease and excitement. And soon people began abandoning their own workouts to follow the unfolding drama. Determined to reassert their dominance, Damien suggested that anyone interested in real strength should gather at the bench press station, his voice cutting through the steady soundtrack of clanking iron as he loaded plates onto the bar. Rico cheered him on, loudly taunting John about whether he could handle serious weight or if he was just another show-off who got lucky with squats. John, pausing to take a measured sip from his water bottle, showed no outward reaction to their provocation, but the attentive gym regulars could sense the quiet resolve in his eyes as he stepped forward. A cluster of curious members surrounded the bench, jostling for a clear view, some unconsciously holding their breath, while others lifted their phones to discreetly film what promised to be a dramatic showdown. Damien settled onto the bench with a theatrical flourish, arching his back and gripping the bar as though he meant to tear it apart, pressing the loaded weight in a burst of unrefined power that elicited scattered applause from those who mistook volume for skill. The more experienced lifters watched with muted concern, recognizing how his form teetered on the brink of injury, though they stayed quiet, wary of Damien's volatile temper. After rattling out a final half-rep with obvious strain, Damien leapt to his feet, chest heaving, and glared in John's direction, demanding that the new guy match, or surpass, his performance if he dared. Maintaining the same calm poise that had defined him so far, John approached the bench, inspecting the haphazardly stacked plates as though verifying their safety before proceeding. A man named Carter, once the victim of the Bullies' taunts, nervously volunteered to spot him, recalling his past embarrassment but now driven by a spark of hope that the tide might be turning. Slipping onto the bench, John aligned his feet firmly on the ground, inhaled deeply, and unracked the bar with a controlled, almost surgical motion, lowering it to his chest before pressing it upward in a flawless demonstration of biomechanical efficiency. Whispers of awe rippled through the onlookers as he repeated the process, each rep fluid and stable, free of the chest-bouncing theatrics that marked Damien's attempt. Even from across the gym, the impact was palpable, a silent statement that technique often triumphs over ego-driven brute force, and by the time he racked the bar, a wave of applause broke out in earnest. Damien's cheeks burned with humiliation as he cast a venomous glare at Rico, silently commanding his friend to salvage their reputation. But Rico wore the same look of uncertainty, realizing they were up against something far beyond typical gym bravado. Seizing on the lingering applause, Damien raised his voice to declare that raw lifting meant nothing without the ability to fight, and he proposed a test of striking power at the heavy bag. This new twist caught the crowd's imagination, for Titan's Edge boasted a modest combat area in the back, complete with punching bags and a small ring, though it seldom saw drama of this magnitude. Rico, desperate to regain lost clout, boasted about his knockout punches, jabbing a finger at John in a challenge that practically begged for an embarrassing comeuppance. John didn't hesitate, heading toward the heavy bag in silence, flanked by a throng of onlookers whose faces reflected everything from raw excitement to barely contained trepidation. Damien pummeled the bag first, unleashing wild swings and breathy grunts that sent echoes across the gym, though anyone with a trained eye could see his punches lacked both discipline and accuracy. Shrugging off Damien's feigned bravado, John steadied the heavy bag with one hand, taking a moment to position his feet before delivering a lightning-quick series of strikes that made the chain rattle ominously. Audible gasps rippled through the crowd as the difference in skill became painfully evident, John's each punch landing with pinpoint control that contrasted sharply with Damien's haphazard style. Rico, incensed by the dramatic gulf in ability, prodded Damien to up the stakes by proposing a friendly spar. In the ring, that thinly veiled code for a fight meant to humiliate John in front of everyone. A hush fell as the staff members glanced at one another, aware that Titan's Edge didn't normally allow spontaneous brawls, yet equally aware this confrontation had escalated far beyond normal boundaries. Damien, fueled by wounded pride, grabbed a pair of boxing gloves from the equipment rack and tossed another pair at John's feet, sneering that it was time to separate the pretenders from the real fighters. John slid the gloves on, checking in with a nearby trainer to confirm that they could indeed use the ring, his tone polite but carrying a hint of finality. The crowd swelled around the ring, forming a tight circle of anxious spectators who half feared and half anticipated a brutal reckoning, phones discreetly raised to capture the moment for posterity. Damien barreled forward the instant the match began, throwing wild swings that tested John's reflexes, each blow powered by raw frustration rather than any studied technique. John dodged and parried with uncanny ease, footwork economical yet graceful, slipping strikes as if dancing to a rhythm Damien couldn't hear. The mismatch became glaringly obvious within seconds, sweat pouring down Damien's forehead as he labored to land even a single meaningful hit on this impenetrable pillar of calm. Bellowing in desperation, Damien charged again, but John deflected him with a short, precise combination that rocked Damien onto his heels, forcing him to reconsider his reckless aggression. The crowd's tension became palpable, hearts pounding in unison as they realized John's restraint was the only thing preventing a catastrophic beatdown. Barely able to contain his anger, Damien unleashed a volley of punches fueled by pure emotion, but John slipped them effortlessly, then countered with a measured body shot that sapped Damien's remaining energy and left him gasping for air. In a swirl of embarrassment, Damien staggered, fighting to stay on his feet while John stepped back, gloves raised in a gesture that signaled patience rather than aggression, as if offering Damien a chance to concede with dignity. Ego burning hotter than reason, Damien tore off his gloves and stormed out of the ring, cursing under his breath, leaving Rico to stew in silent panic. Sensing an opening, Rico scrambled to salvage their reputation, stepping forward with fists clenched, ignoring the protests of the trainer who insisted they only spar one at a time. The staff looked ready to intervene, but before they could, Rico lunged from behind, taking advantage of John's turn back, an underhanded move that made the watchers gasp in shock. John spun around, eyes narrowing with quiet displeasure, and the gym held its collective breath, knowing that this cheap shot might unleash consequences that would resound far beyond this single encounter. The next moments would test not just John's skill, but his restraint, and the result, whether a merciful resolution or a brutal comeuppance, would become the talk of Titan's Edge for years to come. The hush that fell over the ring was so profound one could hear the faint hum of the air conditioning and the anxious shuffle of feet, everyone mentally bracing for the inevitable climax. And as John squared up to face Rico's blindsiding attack, everyone present understood that they were about to witness a reckoning, one that would either break the Bullies' reign of terror or ignite a tempest of retribution unlike anything Titan's Edge had seen. The moment Rico lunged forward with that underhanded, dishonorable strike, the ring at Titan's Edge froze in collective disbelief, a hush so profound that the distant clang of a lone barbell echoed like thunder through the entire gym. John pivoted just in time to block Rico's wild swing, meeting his attack with a fluid deflection that deflated the cheap ambush before it could even reach full force, yet no one watching could miss the change in John's eyes, that flicker of calm resolve giving way to something far more decisive. In that charged instant, every muscle in John's body seemed coiled and ready, not with the desperate energy of a brawler, but with the precise tension of a trained fighter who could end the scuffle in a heartbeat if pushed too far. Rico, fueled by the fear of looking weak in front of Damien and the entire crowd, lashed out again with a barrage of punches that lacked all semblance of technique, arms flailing in a frenzy that once might have intimidated a lesser opponent, but now seemed almost pitiful against John's controlled mastery. Before Rico could complete his next sloppy hook, John slipped inside his reach, using the moment of imbalance to deliver a textbook takedown that left Rico sprawling on the ring floor, the crowd erupting in a collective gasp as disbelief and excitement rippled through every corner of the gym. Damien, standing nearby with fists still trembling from his own humiliating defeat, let out a strangled shout that did nothing to mask the terror in his eyes, for he recognized how thoroughly he and his partner had underestimated the quiet stranger who had just dismantled them both. John glanced toward the staffer overseeing the ring, silently confirming that he had done only what was necessary to defend himself, then stepped back to allow Rico a chance to regain his feet, gloves raised in a universal signal of readiness but not aggression. Rico's face burned with shame as he scrambled upright, struggling to reconcile his bruised pride with the dawning realization that John's skill dwarfed anything he or Damien had encountered before, and yet the bully's arrogant momentum wouldn't let him simply concede. Casting a desperate look at Damien, Rico received nothing but a blank stare in return, for Damien himself seemed torn between an urge to flee and a last-ditch desire to salvage the tatters of their reputations, leaving them both caught in a mire of wounded egos. Determined to prove he was still dangerous, Rico charged at John again, throwing a wild overhand punch that cut the air with a vicious whoosh, only to meet empty space as John sidestepped him with the same silent precision that had defined his every move so far. A flurry of attempted jabs followed, each batted away or slipped entirely, until John, evidently seeing no point in prolonging the farce, countered with a quick succession of strikes that found Rico's midsection and ribs, forcing him to stagger back gasping. It was not the savage knockout blow the crowd might have anticipated, but a measured response, a warrior's restraint that showcased John's ability to dominate without truly harming his opponent, an approach that only heightened the awe etched on every watching face. For a moment, it seemed as though Rico might collapse in defeat, but his rage flared once more at the whispers of astonishment passing through the onlookers, and he attempted yet another desperate swing that John easily intercepted, catching Rico's arm and redirecting his momentum so effectively that Rico nearly flipped onto the mat. The crowd let out a unified roar, not of bloodlust, but of sheer amazement at the technique and discipline John displayed, each movement steeped in a surreal level of control that made the bully's bravado look cartoonish by comparison. Damien, seeing Rico on the brink of utter humiliation, moved as though he might jump into the ring despite the staffer's shouted warnings, but the sudden glare John shot him froze him in place, reminding everyone that John's patience was vast, yet far from infinite. When Rico finally slumped to his knees, eyes glazed with the shock of being so thoroughly outclassed, John took a single step back, lowering his gloves as if granting an unspoken mercy, the surrounding crowd silent in reverence at the spectacle of genuine prowess. At last, a trembling hush enveloped the ring, broken only by Rico's ragged breathing and Damien's shallow, furious inhalations, both men suddenly aware that their bombastic reign over Titan's Edge was at a catastrophic end. One of the senior trainers, who had been quietly observing from the ropes, signaled that the impromptu bout was finished, shooting John a look torn between gratitude and apprehension, as if thankful the situation had resolved without a trip to the emergency room. John, breathing evenly, nodded respectfully, then removed his gloves and set them aside, his every motion imbued with the same poise that had guided his first squat earlier that evening. Without gloating or boasting, he offered Rico and Damien a final, measured glance, neither pitying them nor reveling in their downfall, simply acknowledging them as men who had foolishly chosen to poke a sleeping giant. The throng of gym members erupted in murmured conversation, a buzz of excitement mingling with relief, for they sensed that the tyrannical shadow these bullies had cast over Titan's Edge was now lifted. Some onlookers shook their heads in disbelief at the sight of Damien and Rico's humiliation, recalling the countless smaller harassments and provocations that had gone unchecked until this quiet stranger stepped in. Others whispered about John's unreal skill, speculating that he had to be a pro fighter, an ex-special forces operative, or maybe even the elusive Hollywood action star rumored to perfect his craft in unassuming gyms far from paparazzi. Through it all, John calmly slipped through the ropes and out of the ring, the crowd parting like a reverent sea, eager to give him space yet desperate to glean one more detail from his remarkable presence. Alicia, the receptionist who had watched with bated breath, trembled as she reached for her phone, itching to snap a picture but equally hesitant to invade John's privacy, mindful of the tranquil aura he exuded. Damien, eyes downcast and fists quaking, found himself more humiliated than he had ever been in his entire life, forced to swallow the bitter truth that there were some individuals beyond his ability to bully or outmuscle. Rico nursed his bruised ego on the mat, refusing the assistance of onlookers who tried to help him up, each failed attempt at prideful dignity, reminding him that he had orchestrated his own downfall. A slow wave of applause began to build among the more respectful patrons, not a mocking cheer, but a sincere acknowledgement of John's composure, discipline, and willingness to protect the spirit of the gym without stooping to needless cruelty. John paused, turning slightly toward the sound, and a faint smile tugged at his otherwise serious features, as though he appreciated the sentiment yet preferred not to linger in the spotlight. The manager of Titan's Edge, a tall man with a stern brow and an even temper, approached cautiously, murmuring his thanks for John's restraint in settling the matter before it escalated beyond control. John inclined his head, offering a subtle nod that communicated understanding, as if to say he had been glad to prevent a worse outcome, his words once again scarce but profound in their simplicity. A few of the younger gym members who had often faced Damien and Rico's jibes now mustered the courage to step forward, expressing gratitude for John's intervention and marveling at the skill he demonstrated. John accepted their praises with a gracious modesty that only intensified the aura of mystery swirling around him, many convinced more than ever that they had just witnessed an elite fighter, or maybe even a shadowy celebrity. As the tension drained from the gym, staff members dispersed the crowd, guiding them back to their routines, reminding everyone that Titan's Edge was meant for fitness, not prize fighting. Damien helped Rico to his feet, though neither bully dared cast another insult John's way, their once inflated egos crushed under the weight of undeniable defeat. A quiet camaraderie settled among the regulars, a renewed sense of belonging replacing the fear that had once stalked anyone unlucky enough to catch the bully's attention. John, returning to the locker area, grabbed a fresh towel from his bag and took a few measured breaths, as though sloughing off the tension left behind by the scuffle, then set about cleaning himself up with the same unhurried grace that had marked his every action. Whispers followed him like an invisible entourage, those who recognized his calm competence now holding him in reverence, and those who had never seen him before gravitating toward the rumors swirling around the subtle question of his true identity. Alicia mustered the nerve to approach, quietly offering her thanks for handling the confrontation without letting it devolve into senseless violence, and John responded with a soft-spoken acknowledgement, once again leaving no room for gloating. As he stepped away from the ring area, several battered punching bags lining the wall bore silent testimony to the raw potential that still simmered beneath his reserved demeanor, a quiet power that would remain unseen unless provoked. Damien, face contorted with a mix of rage and humiliation, refused to meet anyone's gaze, while Rico limped off in the opposite direction, ignoring calls from a concerned staffer who offered to check for injuries. In their wake, the gym itself seemed to breathe easier, liberated from the oppressive atmosphere the bullies had cultivated, as if the building's very walls sighed in relief. Over by the free weights, a handful of onlookers started replicating John's impeccable form, recalling how he had outlifted Damien with no fuss, hoping to emulate even a fraction of that calm efficiency. In the corner where John had first been noticed, a lone barbell still bore the plates he had used for squats, and one by one, curious lifters tested themselves against the weight, half expecting it to be some enchanted object that only John could move with such ease. The manager, determined to prevent any future fiascos, quietly pulled Damien and Rico aside, urging them to either modify their behavior or risk losing their memberships, a stark reality check that neither bully had ever imagined they would face. John, wiping the last beads of sweat from his brow, settled onto a nearby bench to finish the final sets of his original workout, seemingly unaffected by the spectacle he had just dominated. Bit by bit, the gym resumed its usual rhythm, the clank of metal and the hum of conversation taking on a brighter, more optimistic tone, as though John's self-restraint and expertise had rekindled a dormant spirit of mutual respect among all who trained there. Those who had been filming the fight now whispered among themselves about whether it was right to post the footage, realizing it might invade John's privacy, and some quietly agreed to delete the recordings out of respect for the man's humility. Others, less scrupulous, entertained the idea of uploading their videos anyway, driven by the thought of going viral, but a lingering sense of guilt gnawed at them each time they recalled John's unassuming manner. Eventually, the final echoes of the confrontation drifted into the background, replaced by the steady pulse of workout music, the chirp of athletic shoes against the mats, and the renewed vigor of people who felt inspired rather than intimidated by the presence of true strength. And somewhere deep in the building's hush, the knowledge that John Wick had effortlessly halted the tyranny of two bullies spread like a quiet rumor, leaving behind only the question of how they would respond to their now legendary downfall. But everyone, from the novices working on their first push-ups to the hardened veterans chasing personal records, sensed that the true impact of John's intervention had only just begun to unfold. Despite the flurry of tension that had subsided throughout Titan's Edge, an almost electric calm remained in the air as gym-goers quietly revisited the site of John Wick's stunning demonstration of skill, both curious about what might happen next and relieved that the bully's reign of terror had finally been curbed. The stories spread like wildfire, from hushed chats at the water fountain to animated retellings in the locker rooms, each version painting John as an unflappable force who had shattered Damien and Rico's facade with effortless composure. Some people swapped whispered theories about John's background, convinced that only a covert operative or a high-level martial artist could have handled two aggressive opponents without breaking a sweat, while others proposed he might actually be that elusive action star rumored to train incognito among regular gyms. The more imaginative members spun tales of shadowy dojos and secret tournaments, marveling at how John's quiet demeanor and humble attire belied the near-superhuman poise he had revealed once provoked. Yet, despite the buzz, John himself seemed uninterested in feeding any rumors, avoiding the limelight as he finished the remainder of his workout with the same calm efficiency that had defined his entire evening at Titan's Edge. A few people mustered the courage to approach him, offering grateful thanks and heartfelt compliments, recalling how they had once felt powerless against Damien and Rico's intimidation tactics, only to witness John neutralize the bullies in a matter of moments. John responded with a quiet kindness, his words concise yet reassuring, urging them to keep training diligently, stand their ground when necessary, and trust that true strength was never about flaunting muscles, but about mastering oneself. His humility only intensified the aura of mystique that surrounded him, prompting more than a handful of curious onlookers to peek from behind machines or attempt subtle eavesdropping, though none dared to press him too hard for personal details. Meanwhile, Damien and Rico had slunk off to a distant corner of the gym, licking their wounds with wounded pride, stubbornly refusing any offer of medical assistance or a cooler head to debrief the humiliating confrontation. Their usual entourage of admirers, once eager to bask in the bully's toxic charisma, found themselves drifting away, either out of fear of John's potential retribution or simple embarrassment at having supported the losing side for so long. Rico, still cradling a deep ache in his torso from John's expertly placed shots, glared resentfully at the bustling crowd, furious that his carefully cultivated image of invincibility had been shattered before so many witnesses. Damien pretended to console him with half-hearted reassurances, but it was clear from the flicker of panic in Damien's eyes that he was even more rattled, replaying the spar in his head and realizing how easily John could have inflicted far greater damage. Eventually, a staff member approached them, quietly reminding them of the gym's strict policy against provoked fights and cautioning that further infractions could lead to revoked memberships, a warning that hung over their bruised egos like a guillotine. That same staff member, on returning to the front desk, confided to Alicia that the presence of John Wick might have saved the gym from a lawsuit or a full-scale brawl, and Alicia nodded fervently, her hands still trembling from the aftershock of watching him handle the bullies. In the locker room, a chorus of excited murmurs filled the air, with newcomers eager to hear first-hand accounts from those who had witnessed every moment of John's decisive takedowns, while a few veterans quietly reflected on the deeper lesson that no matter how intimidating someone seems, real power speaks softly. Marcus, the retired boxer who'd seen more than his fair share of testosterone-fueled showdowns, confided to a cluster of wide-eyed younger lifters that John's mastery reminded him of elite fighters he'd encountered in his prime, those with iron discipline and an uncanny ability to stay calm under fire. Many nodded in agreement, remarking that the night's events had injected a new spirit of camaraderie into Titan's Edge, a long-overdue reminder that mutual respect was at the heart of any genuine fitness journey. Word reached the gym manager, who had been momentarily off-site, prompting him to rush back, anxious to confirm the rumors that two bullies had been bested in a whirlwind of martial prowess by a man who barely broke a sweat. Spotting John near the free weights, the manager approached with a mixture of awe and gratitude, thanking him for preventing a situation that could have easily spiraled out of control, though John merely downplayed his role, stating that he'd only intervened to protect his own workout and the gym's peaceful environment. The manager, taking note of John's self-effacing manner, decided it was best not to pry too deeply into the man's history, figuring that anyone so capable of dispatching trouble with such restraint deserved a certain measure of privacy. Nonetheless, curiosity bubbled in his mind, and he made a mental note to discreetly check if John's name was already in the membership system or if he'd just signed a day pass, suspecting that a visitor of his caliber might have a story worth knowing. While this subtle investigation brewed, the rest of the gym settled into a more relaxed atmosphere, many members returning to their sets with renewed energy, emboldened by the knowledge that the bullies' reign of intimidation had met a quiet but formidable end. Some found themselves inspired to push harder, as if determined to honor the spirit of true discipline John had exhibited, and the clang of barbells and the hum of treadmills took on a buoyant, hopeful cadence. Even the music overhead seemed to pulse with a fresher intensity, as though reflecting the collective exhalation of relief shared by those who had once dreaded crossing Damien and Rico's path. By the time John racked his final set of dumbbells and grabbed a towel to wipe away the sheen of sweat on his brow, a small congregation of appreciative faces had gathered around him, hesitant yet eager to express their admiration. One young man, stammering from excitement, asked John if he offered private lessons or knew of any reputable self-defense classes in the area, to which John replied that he had no official teaching schedule, but encouraged them to seek out formal martial arts instructors to develop proper fundamentals. Others sought small talk, curious about his training routines or favorite exercises, but John deftly steered the conversation toward the importance of consistency, injury prevention, and humility in the face of progress. In the weeks following John Week's mysterious departure from Titan's Edge, the gym underwent a tangible transformation, its members embracing a newfound sense of camaraderie that resonated through every row of weights and cardio machines, as though the very walls carried an echo of his disciplined spirit. Word of the legendary encounter continued to spread far beyond the building's neon facade, transforming local chatter in cafes and barbershops into near-mythic retellings of how two bullies had been humbled by a quiet force of nature whose skill seemed to defy explanation. Though Damien and Rico initially tried to maintain a low profile, skulking around the gym's periphery in the hopes that the firestorm of gossip would die down, they soon realized that John's impact was too vast to simply fade away, and that their reputations were more tarnished than ever before. Some of the younger lifters, emboldened by the example John set, openly challenged the bullies' prior dominance over the free weight section, refusing to yield benches or equipment just because Damien or Rico demanded it, leading to awkward standoffs that ended with the bullies slinking away rather than causing another scene. The gym manager, seeking to preserve the supportive atmosphere John had inspired, quietly instituted a new respect-first policy, which effectively barred harassment and intimidation under threat of immediate membership revocation, a rule that hung over Damien and Rico like a permanent storm cloud. Despite their waning influence, the bullies attempted to cling to a shred of relevance by trading hushed grievances late at night, plotting a grand gesture of revenge they believed would restore their lost glory. Fueled by bruised egos, they began training with obsessive intensity, Damien pouring hours into refining his lifting technique while Rico studied fight videos online, convinced that if John ever returned, they would be ready to crush him and reclaim the throne they felt had been unjustly stolen. Yet, as Damien tried to perfect his squats under the watchful gaze of more experienced members, it became painfully clear that he lacked the patient humility needed to build a stable foundation, and his efforts frequently ended in dangerous overextensions that left staff hastening to his side, fearing a catastrophic injury. Rico fared no better in the boxing corner, where he shadowboxed in front of a mirror, aping techniques he barely understood, ignoring the kind advice of a part-time coach who offered to correct his stance for free, his pride too inflamed to accept real guidance. Meanwhile, other gym-goers blossomed under the no-bullying policy, forming spontaneous workout groups to share tips and encourage each other. Their camaraderie a stark contrast to the toxic legacy Damien and Rico had once spread with their sneering laughter and condescending remarks. Alicia, the receptionist, quietly observed this cultural shift, reminiscing about the night John had effortlessly neutralized the bullies and left behind a flicker of hope that decency and humility could triumph in any environment, no matter how testosterone-charged. On more than one occasion, patrons would glance at the front entrance whenever the door hissed open, half expecting to see John's calm silhouette stepping in from the street. But each time it was someone else, fueling a lingering sense of collective longing for his return. Despite the bullies' grumbling complaints that they were being unfairly judged, the rest of Titan's Edge flourished in a way it never had before, drawing new members intrigued by the gym's rumored redemption arc, and boosting sales of day passes as curious locals ventured in to see if the legends were true. Through whispered accounts and watchful speculation, people continued to debate John's true identity. Some were certain he was an ex-Navy SEAL or special operative. Others swore they recognized him from behind-the-scenes footage of stunt coordinators teaching complex fight choreography to Hollywood's elite. In the weeks following John Wick's mysterious departure from Titan's Edge, the gym underwent a tangible transformation, its members embracing a newfound sense of camaraderie that resonated through every row of weights and cardio machines, as though the very walls carried an echo of his disciplined spirit. Word of the legendary encounter continued to spread far beyond the building's neon facade, transforming local chatter in cafes and barbershops into near-mythic retellings of how two bullies had been humbled by a quiet force of nature whose skill seemed to defy explanation. Though Damien and Rico initially tried to maintain a low profile, skulking around the gym's periphery in the hopes that the firestorm of gossip would die down, they soon realized that John's impact was too vast to simply fade away, and that their reputations were more tarnished than ever before. Some of the younger lifters, emboldened by the example John set, openly challenged the bullies' prior dominance over the free weight section, refusing to yield benches or equipment just because Damien or Rico demanded it, leading to awkward standoffs that ended with the bullies slinking away rather than causing another scene. The gym manager, seeking to preserve the supportive atmosphere John had inspired, quietly instituted a new respect-first policy, which effectively barred harassment and intimidation under threat of immediate membership revocation, a rule that hung over Damien and Rico like a permanent storm cloud. Despite their waning influence, the bullies attempted to cling to a shred of relevance by trading hushed grievances late at night, plotting a grand gesture of revenge they believed would restore their lost glory. Fueled by bruised egos, they began training with obsessive intensity, Damien pouring hours into refining his lifting technique while Rico studied fight videos online, convinced that if John ever returned, they would be ready to crush him and reclaim the throne they felt had been unjustly stolen. Yet, as Damien tried to perfect his squats under the watchful gaze of more experienced members, it became painfully clear that he lacked the patient humility needed to build a stable foundation, and his efforts frequently ended in dangerous overextensions that left staff hastening to his side, fearing a catastrophic injury. Rico fared no better in the boxing corner, where he shadowboxed in front of a mirror, aping techniques he barely understood, ignoring the kind advice of a part-time coach who offered to correct his stance for free, his pride too inflamed to accept real guidance. Meanwhile, other gym-goers blossomed under the no-bullying policy, forming spontaneous workout groups to share tips and encourage each other. Their camaraderie a stark contrast to the toxic legacy Damien and Rico had once spread with their sneering laughter and condescending remarks. Alicia, the receptionist, quietly observed this cultural shift, reminiscing about the night John had effortlessly neutralized the bullies and left behind a flicker of hope that decency and humility could triumph in any environment, no matter how testosterone-charged. On more than one occasion, patrons would glance at the front entrance whenever the door hissed open, half expecting to see John's calm silhouette stepping in from the street. But each time it was someone else, fueling a lingering sense of collective longing for his return. Despite the bullies' grumbling complaints that they were being unfairly judged, the rest of Titan's Edge flourished in a way it never had before, drawing new members intrigued by the gym's rumored redemption arc, and boosting sales of day passes as curious locals ventured in to see if the legends were true. Through whispered accounts and watchful speculation, people continued to debate John's true identity. Some were certain he was an ex-Navy SEAL or special operative. Others swore they recognized him from behind-the-scenes footage of stunt coordinators teaching complex fight choreography to Hollywood's elite. Damien, stoking the fires of his wounded pride, strove to disprove such notions by boldly declaring that John Wick was nothing more than a lucky show-off who would crumble under real challenge if given a second round, though few took this claim seriously after witnessing the first altercation. Eventually, a day came when rumors began to swirl that John had been spotted around town, visiting smaller gyms incognito, leaving them similarly transformed by his example, fostering supportive communities in places where bullies once held sway. This talk reached Titan's Edge like a rolling thunder, with members speculating that if John was truly on some secret mission to elevate gym culture, then perhaps he would soon return to witness the fruits of his impact firsthand. Damien and Rico, hearing these whispers, doubled their training efforts, pushing themselves to the brink of exhaustion, ignoring pains and strains that should have served as red flags, determined to conjure the improbable scenario where they could confront John a second time in the ring. As fate would have it, one balmy evening, a hush fell across Titan's Edge when the front door opened to reveal not John, but a lean, unassuming figure wearing a hooded jacket that could so easily be mistaken for him. However, the figure turned out to be someone else entirely, prompting a collective sigh of anticipation denied. This near encounter only further fueled the speculation, driving Damien to load up a barbell with a reckless amount of weight in a bid to prove he had evolved from his earlier fiasco. Straining under the bar, he managed a shaky descent into a squat, but immediately felt a sharp twinge in his lower back, forcing him to bail out in a disastrous attempt that sent the bar crashing into the safety pins, nearly rolling off and causing a major scene. The staff rushed over, lecturing him on safety, while onlookers muttered that Damien's pride was going to get him hurt, and in the ensuing embarrassment, he lashed out verbally, nearly earning himself an official warning for aggressive conduct. Rico, not to be outdone, tried to show off his upgraded fight technique in the boxing corner, challenging any volunteer to a quick spar, but found no willing victims among members who now valued a drama-free workout. Seizing on a newcomer who didn't know the bully's reputation, Rico coaxed him into a light drill, only for the newcomer to reveal advanced martial arts training and systematically dismantle Rico's defense, culminating in yet another humiliating display that left bystanders shaking their heads. Word of this repeated failure traveled fast, further eroding what little intimidation Damien and Rico still wielded, and some joked that the bully seemed cursed by John's lingering aura of justice. With every passing day, the pair grew more desperate, haunted by the possibility that John might one day return and find them even less formidable than before, fueling their obsession with forging a mythical revenge scenario no one else believed in. Alicia, ever watchful behind the reception desk, quietly updated the manager on Damien and Rico's deteriorating behavior, counseling that perhaps it was time to have a serious conversation about whether they truly belonged in an environment that now celebrated unity, respect, and progress over bravado. Before the manager could act, fate took another twist when, late on a weekday evening, a figure entered Titan's Edge wearing a familiar dark hood, prompting an immediate hush among everyone present, from the staff to the last few stragglers finishing their routines. For a heart-stopping moment, even Damien and Rico froze mid-sulk, adrenaline spiking in the hope or dread that their chance at karmic vengeance, or deeper humiliation, had arrived. As the figure approached the free weight area, people discreetly craned their necks, only to see that, once again, it wasn't John, but a random passerby who had bought a day pass. sparking a collective exhalation of relieved disappointment. Damien and Rico cursed under their breath, their tension deflating like a pierced balloon, further highlighting how their entire sense of purpose now seemed wrapped up in proving themselves to a man who might never return. Their frustration hit a boiling point 2 nights later when Damien, ignoring all form and caution, loaded the leg press with an absurd number of plates, determined to break some personal record for the sake of reclaiming lost pride, only for the machine to buckle under the unbalanced load, sending it crashing and pinning his leg in a near-disastrous accident. Rico, scrambling to help, ended up straining his shoulder in the frantic attempt to remove plates, and the staff had to call for assistance from nearby members who hurried to lift the weight off Damien's trapped limb. Though he escaped serious injury, Damien's humiliating predicament drew gasps and exasperated looks, culminating in a stern decision from the manager. The Bullies' reckless behavior had gone too far, and their memberships were summarily suspended. A wave of relief coursed through Titan's Edge as Damien and Rico hobbled away, cursing management for coddling weaklings and vowing they'd find a real gym that appreciated their style, though few believed their bravado. The manager, stepping into the suddenly brighter atmosphere, announced the suspension publicly, affirming that the spirit John Wick had embodied, the desire to train with respect and uplift others, would remain the gym's guiding principle. From that day on, Titan's Edge truly embraced its new identity, free from the Bullies' toxic hold, and membership soared as word spread that the once feared duo was gone, banished by the very standards John's presence had helped cement. Occasionally, people would ask if anyone had seen or heard from John, hoping he might make one final appearance to witness the culmination of all he'd set in motion, but he remained elusive, a quiet legend drifting through rumor and whispered recollection. In time, the tale of his confrontation with the Bullies swelled into a local legend, exaggerated in some retellings, perhaps, but always grounded in the central truth that discipline, humility, and quiet strength had triumphed over intimidation. Members began seeing small tributes to John appear around the gym, a poster by the boxing corner reminding everyone that true power requires control, a plaque near the squat rack bearing the phrase, "respect over ego," and even a monthly workshop dedicated to conflict resolution, all subtle nods to the lessons he had left behind. In hushed corners, some still speculated that he was indeed a Hollywood stunt virtuoso, or maybe an unsung martial artist on a personal quest, but most came to realize that it didn't really matter who John Wick was, only what he represented. And so, the biggest karmic twist of all lay not in some cinematic final showdown with the Bullies, but in the slow, steady transformation that saw them banished by the very environment they had once polluted, an outcome that felt even more profound than a direct fight. Long after Damien and Rico were gone, members of Titan's Edge continued to share the story with new arrivals. A quiet, disciplined man who walked in, shattered two Bullies' reign, and vanished without a need for applause, leaving behind a legacy of respect, empathy, and genuine strength. For many, his name became emblematic of the gym's renaissance, spoken with a hushed reverence whenever disagreements or tensions threatened to arise, serving as a reminder that not all victories have to be loud, and that the strongest among us often remain the most humble. Whether John Wick would ever step foot in Titan's Edge again remained a tantalizing mystery, but it was enough to know that his spirit endured in every act of kindness and mutual support that now defined the place, ensuring his legend would never fade.